We think of pets as family, but in the eyes of the law, they're still property. What does this mean for their future? Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk. I'm Em. This is the podcast where we cut through the noise and talk honestly about the highs, the lows, and the lessons of life with dogs. This is a space where you can feel seen, supported, and inspired without judgment, quick fixes, or cookie cutter advice. Today, I'm joined by Susanna Gartner, a trailblazer in the world of animal law. She founded the first animal law firm in Canada and has dedicated her career to giving animals a legal voice. She's a mediator, activist, and the author of A Voice for Animals, the social movement that provides dignity and compassion for animals. Susanna's work bridges empathy and the courtroom, challenging how society and the legal systems view animals, whether there are companions in shelters, on farms, or in the wild. Her story is about turning compassion into action and meaningful change. In this episode, you'll hear why animals are still classified as property under the law and what that really means when they're harmed, the inspiration behind Susanna's book, A Voice for Animals, and the philosophy she's bringing to the animal rights movement, how you can advocate for your animals in your own community, whether that's through shelters, policy change, or simply making your voice heard. This conversation is one about justice, compassion, and the fight to ensure animals are finally seen for who they really are, not just what they're worth. Susanna, your personal journey started while you were volunteering at shelters as a child. What did those early experiences teach you about animals and about people?
Reading their stories inspired me to want to do something to help them at a young age.
It's really great when people get involved at a young age, especially in something they're passionate about, because that helps shape them as an adult. They learn things a little bit younger, they mature a little bit faster, but they also learn the cost and benefits analysis of what is happening in society. And I think that that's really beneficial because it's not something that we teach in school. We don't teach kids how to effectively do much more than balance their checkbook. We don't teach kids why they should volunteer in certain areas of their community. We don't teach those things. So it's really important that you figured that out at a very young age and that you have just driven it into this passion throughout your life.
Thank you so much. That's so well said and such an important point. And what I'm trying to convey in my whole advocacy work is what you just said in a nutshell, to bring that bridge closer and to help people realize that they can help in any way. They can start small by doing, for example, what I did. It actually started with me wanting to adopt a dog or a cat and luring my mom into the shelters to go and view them, and then realizing that, okay, at the time we couldn't adopt a dog, so we decided that I would then be able to help at the shelters. And that in itself became a cause that I became very passionate about. But bringing back your point of it being taught in schools, that is so important and something that hopefully will happen one day, because children absorb information like sponges, and the more that they can learn, because they are the next generation, how important it is to save shelter animals rather than purchasing pets online or through breeders, and then they change the world by learning. So that's something that I'm actually really passionate about in my next half of my life. So I'm really glad you brought that up, to try to bring it into schools, bring shelter pets into the classroom so that they can learn and hopefully tell their parents, I want a dog from a shelter. I don't want a breeder pet, because then we're saving lives and then we're teaching as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a way to combine things. We had another guest on earlier this year who does that. Her children are very young. She's a really big volunteer, and she brings the information about the dogs in her local shelter to her children's classrooms.
Love
The
that.
children make artwork for the dogs' kennels at the
Aww.
shelter and all kinds of really neat things that the new adopting owners get to take home with them. It's just a really neat way to teach kids something beautiful, and then she always loves to be able to tell them, your dog got adopted this week, or something like
Aw,
that.
well, that's beautiful. I love that. I really love those programs that can bring shelter pets to children and to the community as well. So beyond the children, I see the community as a pillar of strength and possibility for shelter animals, because it is a community-wide program and problem that we face nowadays, with the euthanasia rates still sky high, unfortunately.
It really is very sad that we have gotten to this point that we're euthanizing so many animals every single year. And it's not just a state to state problem, it literally is an entire United States problem. It's happening in every single state, in every single county. And it's just so sad to me that we have people who just think that they can breed a litter of puppies to make money and then just dispose of them when they don't make them money.
Yeah, I would say the whole root problem of animal disposability and the shelter, I call it a crisis, because with the ownership of animals and being able to sell them, they become a commodity, objects in the eyes of those people that choose to profit from selling pets, to this disconnect of animals as living, breathing beings. And that is what I do like to talk about in my book, as the root cause of the problem of disposability. And so to turn it into a positive is to encourage individuals to not support those breeders, to not, oh, there you go. We have someone that agreed. Yes, that's right. To not support unethical breeders and to rescue. Please rescue, rescue. And you're doing your part. People often will ask me, I feel overwhelmed by animal rights and what you do. Some people, not everybody, of course. I want to help, but I can't. I can't go to the shelter. It feels so sad and disheartening. And I try to spin it into a positive by saying, well, you know what? Your one act of kindness can change the world for one animal. And that is doing something. And hopefully we can inspire people to want to get involved, because so many of us love animals and most of us don't want to profit from, these unethical breeders, but they just don't know what to do. So I am here to hopefully inspire people to feel confident and do something.
And I love that, because I think that we need more people who are being a voice and who are educating, which kind of brings me very easily to the next question, which is, what ultimately inspired you to pursue law as the way to advocate for animals?
Well, that was also quite a journey in itself, because again, as a child, wanted to dedicate my life to helping animals and ended up becoming a lawyer. In the back of my mind, I would love to do something to help animals. I had a lot of naysayers along the way, and ended up in corporate law to start, and just didn't feel passionate about it. So then I left corporate law early on in my career to do a master's of law, with the idea that I might one day teach animal law, which didn't happen that way. But I finished the Master of Laws and was able to write my thesis on reducing euthanasia rates in shelters using a collaborative consensus approach and mediation, because my Master of Law was as a mediator, and I became a mediator as well as a lawyer. And I was lucky enough to have a professor who loved animals like us. At the time, she was actually feeding a feral cat, and we were talking about that feral cat, and I brought in, we can't really bring in the feral cat into the shelter, but I was wondering if I could write my thesis on a topic that would help shelter dogs and cats and increase those live release rates. And so that became a thesis. I ended up volunteering with my local government officials, municipal councillors, to change some laws to reduce rates of euthanasia, combining my thesis. And then I just decided that there was no law firm in Canada dedicated to advancing the interests of animals. I'm not sure in the States. There may have been, so I don't want to say definitively, but I knew in Canada there wasn't a specific law firm that would be dedicated completely in helping advance the animal rights. So I started the law firm not knowing if I would get a case, and I did. I got a phone call about a week later. I put on my website, and it was a couple that were separating, and they both wanted the dog full time, and they didn't want to go through the courts. And so I helped them resolve their conflict, and what they did was they shared the dog. we created an approach, like an agreement, that couldn't have been created in the legal system because it would have been a judgment at the time. And I focused on the dog's best interests, and it fueled me to continue. And then I expanded my practice to other areas.
I love that. You founded the first animal law firm in Canada. What challenges did you face when you started in a field where it was brand new? Like, this didn't exist.
Oh, well, there were a lot of jokes at cocktail parties. I remember that, which was really, really funny looking back. But at the time, I don't think I found it very funny because I felt like a lone wolf. I was starting something, and in the legal profession itself, it would definitely be an interesting dinner conversation, right? Oh, what do you do, Susanna? I'm an animal rights lawyer. People would look at me and say, what are you doing? Especially amongst other lawyers. It took a lot of persistence and patience because it didn't become busy overnight. I had to hustle. I had to write a lot of blogs to get my website populated and relevant. So I would research, and I had no one really to ask. There was a lawyer in New York, Deborah Hamilton. I'd like to give her some credit. She's an amazing lawyer. She deals with pet custody, and I did speak to her several times because she had a niche practice. And that was helpful. So for anyone that's looking to maybe one day become an animal rights lawyer or a politician or even an advocate, it's good to look at other people that have done something and ask questions and don't be intimidated. Follow your passion and your heart. And it ended up being a busy law firm.
So incredible. I honestly, until I think last year, didn't realize that there were all of these, I don't know, even want to use the word, these issues in animal rights as far as who can take the dog, what happens to the dog when you die, just all kinds of various things. I think I was following somebody on Facebook whose significant other passed and ended up in some crazy legal battle with his sisters over the dogs, and unfortunately didn't have the money to keep up with it and ultimately lost the dog after her partner passed. And I just could not believe it, because it was even stated by these sisters that they didn't really want the dog. They didn't care for the dog. They just didn't want her to have the dog. And the court case still ruled in their favor, which is just unbelievable to me that people are like, it's a dog, it's property. No,
Yeah,
no,
I
it's so
know.
much more than that.
It's so much more. I'm so sorry to hear this story, and it's more common than people would think. And as long as the laws still do consider our dogs as property, right, personal possessions, no different than this chair that I'm sitting on, the courts continue to award ownership rights to people that may not be suited, may not even love the dog, may have something against the other person, especially during people separating. Thankfully, though, this is changing. So, for example, in California, judges are considering the best interests of the animals in divorce cases, in other states like Alaska. So, slowly, the courts are recognizing that our beloved pets do deserve a separate status. So, there is hope on the horizon that this is slowly changing, but not everywhere. So, it's good for people to know that as long as we continue to treat our animals in the courts, not individually or even in mainstream. I mean, if you took polls and asked people, how do you feel about your dog? Is your dog a family member? I'm pretty sure most people would say absolutely, without a question of a doubt. However, there's that disconnect with the court system. So it's slowly catching up. And the more these cases are going to court and the more that the status quo is being challenged, we are seeing progress. Slowly, but we are.
At least we're seeing forward movement. That's all that matters, is to
Yes.
be able to see that we're making change, that the movement is changing, and that we are thinking about the well-being of the animal. And this is another area where if we're thinking about the well-being of the animal, a couple splits, one of them gets the dog, the other one doesn't. And if we don't put the dog in the right place, now this couple that is split, maybe the one partner who gets the dog decides they don't want the dog, and just to spite the other partner, now the dog is in the shelter. It's just things like that that are so horrible, when this dog could have been somewhere that they would have been loved and taken care of for the rest of their life. And now they're just a number in the system because we as humans can't get our shit together.
Yeah, yes, exactly. exactly. We as humans are the ones that need to be the voices. That's why I titled my book A Voice for Animals. Each one of us an advocate in our own right, even if we don't do what I'm doing, like dedicate our career to what you're doing, which is amazing, is giving a voice to dogs and this issue to the public, right? Bringing this to the public in terms of education and inspiration by expressing our disagreement with the way that animals are treated in the court system, by writing our politicians, by bringing these cases forward. We are standing up for them, and change is happening, as I mentioned. And there was even a few decisions in New York recently that were favorable to the dog in terms of a best interest, and I was really pleased to see that. So it is happening.
Which is wonderful. And in your book, you talk about creating a social movement that's rooted in dignity and compassion. What sparked your decision to write this book in the first place?
Well, the book was written as a way for me to cope with the loss of my dog, Charlie. So I wasn't planning to write a book at the time. You know how things happen, life happens. And I was really bonded with this dog. He was a pet store dog. It was before we had kids. And we saw this dog with a for sale sign in the pet shop. He was a small Pomeranian, looked a little bit like your dog that we saw in the beginning.
He's
And
right here. He's sleeping.
oh, there you go. You look like that. Isn't that so cute? Charlie, I don't know if you can see it here, but here he is. There he is right there. Yeah, so he was in the pet shop, and I found out he'd been there, transported around from pet shop to pet shop for almost a year. So he wasn't a puppy. He had the for sale sign, so a number of times slashed. Someone had bought him, returned him, and I just fell in love with him. I picked him up, and he licked my earlobe. From then on, it was a love story. He became my best friend. We traveled around. We moved to California, to Newfoundland, and he was always there with us. So when he passed, like for all of us, it was extremely difficult. So I started writing just about animals and Charlie as a way to cope with the loss and to speak up for other dogs in shelters. I thought that would be a way to honor his memory. And with that journey, I started to realize that there is so much that I can share with what I've learned along the way. And then I went back to the shelter to volunteer. It's something that I love to do in the municipal pounds, which, as you know, they do have euthanasia. They're not no kill. We can talk about that so people can know if you like as well, so that they understand. So they have kill rates, and this dog looks so much like Charlie. He was a Pomino, so the same color, similar size. Someone had abandoned him at the shelter, and he barked a lot. And I was worried he was going to get euthanized. He would recognize me when I'd come, and luckily my mom ended up adopting him. So that was cool, very cool that she did that, and he lived a long, happy life, and he was pampered till the end. But it also awakened me to the reality that what about these other animals that I'm leaving now that are adoptable, that are healthy, that are treatable, that need behavior? So many need behavior assessments, need some dog training, and they'd be great dogs, and they're not given a chance. And so then I started writing the book about companion animals and the shelter system, and combining my thesis. But what happened in that time was I started to become aware of other animals as well and their plight. So it just turned into a whole book about inspiring people to just learn more and hopefully get involved in some way.
And you really do have such a wonderful message in your book. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
I was really not familiar with all of the legal stuff. I'm familiar enough with how shelters work and kill rates and how dogs end up getting euthanized and all that kind of stuff. But you really give a full picture of what it's like and how to be able to identify it in your own rescue, because every rescue is different, just like every dog is different. Every rescue is different. They have a different set of rules. They have a different sort of framework for how it's going to run, how long the dogs have, what do we do to get them adopted, what kind of programs they offer. Everything is so completely different no matter where you go, rescue to rescue. And so it's really important to be able to kind of weed through the presentation of the rescue and kind of look behind the curtain to identify what the real needs and real problems are. And I think that you do a beautiful job of helping people understand what they need to be looking for in those situations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was what I hoped the book would do.
You bring up a lot of information in your book, but one thing that I think is really important for just everyone to know is your acceptable companion animal philosophy framework. Can you explain what it is and how it might change how society treats pets to everyone?
Thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate that, because that is also the heart of the message of my book. As I was writing, I realized that we as a society, we care about our individual pets, and in general, we love dogs and cats, domesticated animals, and we feel sad for the homeless cat pets, but we seem to be able to separate ourselves from them. And so I came up with acceptable companion animal philosophy. The acronym is ACAP, so to put a cap on the killing. First step in honoring, in advancing the rights of these animals is to stop with the euthanasia of healthy, treatable, adoptable animals and to come up with other strategies to increase adoptions, to work with communities, to spay, neuter, to not support the unethical breeders and the pet stores, and just in general a philosophy of consensus in which we agree that we are not going to kill animals anymore in the shelter system. And that's what I came up with as a way to bring us together. So through my mediation experience, in terms of not pulling people away with cold and perhaps even very distant laws, that can come later. But it's this consensus, this philosophy that acceptable companion animal philosophy means that we accept as a society, as Americans, as Canadians, for example, that we're going to stop this. And the way to do that, of course, is through the government. As a start, though, it is the communities themselves, right? Because the communities, the shelters rely on the communities. They take in people's unwanted pets for the most part, lost pets. And then they have these, like you said, the rescues, the shelters have different ways of dealing with them. They have timelines, expiry dates. I was worried about my mom's dog Gucci, for example. He had been there a while. I knew what was coming, so I was desperate to get him out. But that's how it starts, and that's the heart of my proposal that I have not yet brought to government officials because I was so busy working as a lawyer and writing books, etc. But that is something that I will hopefully do one day. I never say for sure. I think it's important, and that's why I thought of that as a solution to the shelter debacle.
The biggest problem is that shelters are still overflowing. Animals are still, as we said, treated as disposable. Cats, dogs, horses, pigs, anything that someone sees as a pet, they're crowding up the shelters because people get tired of them. They don't want to take care of them. They're too expensive. Now it's sick and they don't want to deal with that. All of the things. And people find the most ridiculous reasons to surrender a pet. But from a legal standpoint, what systematic changes do you feel are most urgent to help with the overpopulation crisis?
Well, so that's a really good point of pets being in shelters is overcrowded, or like I like to call them companion animals. Pets are a cute name for them, and it's of course relevant. It is, like you said, companion animals that can include rabbits, even, right? So some shelters do accept rabbits, some don't. Cats, dogs, rescues that take in horses, farm animals, etc. Systematically, from a legal perspective, the no-kill model is still highly relevant and important. No-kill has been a term that's been utilized and implemented by shelters and has been successful. No-kill meaning that healthy, adoptable shelter animals will be saved from euthanasia. However, not every shelter has embraced it or has been able to follow it. For example, an open policy shelter that accepts all animals. Think about that overcrowding that can occur, especially after the pandemic. So I became the director of a humane society here in Toronto of programs and operations a couple of years ago. So it was after the pandemic when these pandemic pets were being purchased in droves. And what happened was when I became the director there, they were just being surrendered daily. People were going back to work. They wanted to travel more. They realized they were allergic. They didn't do enough research. So from a systemic legal point of view, there have to be laws in place that are enforced. And that's where I come back to my acceptable companion animal philosophy, which is that killing shelter pets must end. That is a socially responsible move that we owe these animals. We bring them into this world and we're systemically allowing them to be killed. It's just mind-boggling, isn't it? When there are solutions. I talk about solutions in my book. And so that's something that I'm very passionate about. I do believe that it is getting better. Again, ebbs and flows. We have to remember that. Ebbs and flows. And there are shelters that are trying their best. Not as many do implement the no-kill, but that does exist. So from a federal level, from a legislative animal protection policy implementation statewide, that can be something that we can all work toward with our government officials, sort of individually, so that again, it doesn't become overwhelming, like, oh, what can I do? Well, what you can do is get involved, volunteer, find out from others which shelters are no-kill, and try to implement their policies to these other shelters. It's not that difficult, actually. And I do believe that we're on the way to implementing no kill. I do believe that.
Which would be really wonderful. And again, this is another area, we've talked about this in podcast episodes before, where every state has different laws. So
Yes.
Make sure that you guys are looking at what your state regulations are. Make sure you're looking at what your rules and laws for your local shelters are. Find the shelters that are still allowing for the kill option versus the no kill shelters, and help at those shelters that are suffering, because that is the most underrated thing about this community, is that everyone who loves dogs, who wants to help dogs, they know that they have to kind of dig into the hard areas, and going into those no kill shelters is easy because all of those dogs are safe. Going into the kill shelters is hard, because you don't know day to day, week to week, month to month, what the environment's going to look like, what dogs are going to be in there, how many you might get to help for a few days and then never see again. It can be really, really awful emotionally, but those are the areas that really need your voice the most.
Absolutely. That's so well said, and it's extremely important. Also making the connection, and why I encourage people individually, again, they don't have to become an expert in the field. And so many people want to help, and connecting individually to an animal is it's just amazing. It's a wonderful experience. And then saving that animal, it just becomes almost contagious, because you realize that you can make a difference. And with enough of our voices together trying to encourage these changes, it will happen eventually. It has to, because this cannot continue. I mean, when I hear about these gas chambers in certain states being banned, I'm like thinking, this is still happening. It is, but when you hear that one's closed down, that's progress. So we have to celebrate the small steps toward eradicating this whole system of killing shelter pets on an individual and or community level. We had a community here in Canada, in Toronto, that was focused on no kill in the municipal shelters, and also some people might be interested in making it their jobs, applying for these positions, because we want compassionate leaders in the shelter systems, even in the kill shelters, because they then will implement policies. Laws are one thing, but there are internal policies which are much easier to pass than the laws themselves, and advocate for live release rates.
There are so many small things that can turn into big things. And
Yes.
I really believe that if we could just, again, come together as a community, that it would be much easier to change a lot of this stuff if our voices were louder than they are right now.
Yes. I know there's a lot going on in the world, and I know most of us care. They want to do something. There are so many compassionate choices that we can make. You can adopt if you can adopt. Even fostering is amazing. So many people don't realize that you take that animal out of the shelter system, a lonely, dark, cold place, and you give them love and enrichment. You can't afford to have an animal. Fostering, some shelters will even pay for the food and the veterinary care, and provide training so that you're giving that animal a chance of finding a loving home. So there are so many things that can be done. Like, if you don't want to go to the legislation, that's understandable. That can be a little intimidating, right? But that's okay, because it's all of us coming together and doing something that will be the voice for these animals, and so that the killing can stop.
All the jobs need to be filled. All of the
Yes.
jobs need to be filled.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely.
Beyond pets, your book also covers wildlife, farm animals, and lab animals. How do you envision building a unified framework that protects all animals without diluting focus?
Obviously, I would love to advocate for every species of animals because I believe that it is a holistic cause. I believe that every animal, including a wild animal, a farm animal, companion animal, is a sentient being. They're alive, they have emotions, they have feelings, and so advocating for all of them is something that I deeply do believe in. But I do think it starts with the companion animals because of the close connection. My own journey in expanding the book to have chapters on wildlife and farm animals wasn't what I intended initially, because I too had connections with companion animals only until I started visiting farm sanctuaries. And I remember meeting a pig named Penelope who wagged her tail, a little black pig, and she ran up to greet me and then lay on her back for a belly rub. And in meeting those farm animals, I made the connection that they all deserve protection. So it is a unified cause, and stronger animal protection laws are necessary for all animals. The strategies may differ, but the value of their lives does not.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's something that I struggle with a lot, honestly, where people don't recognize that animals are sentient beings, that they have thoughts, that they have emotions, and that they have expressed feelings about the things that are happening around them. It just doesn't make sense to me how people don't recognize that. Because we measure intelligence in such a different way as humans, we don't give animals the credit they deserve because they don't speak. And so we can't measure that intelligence the same way because we feel that because they cannot express themselves verbally, they're not on the same level as us. But in most cases, I think dogs are like way beyond us
Yeah.
intelligence wise.
Well, they have a sixth sense, right? I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
talk about, for example, in the book, a shelter dog named Peanut who was severely abused, and she was a small dog. She ended up luckily getting adopted, and she saved a little girl with her sixth sense. So her new guardians or new pet parents saw her barking one day outside, and a human guardian went to see what was wrong. Why is she barking like this? And she found a little girl in a ditch, a 3-year-old little girl who was being abused. And that sixth sense is something we can learn from. This animal that had been abused, that didn't let that destroy her ability to love and to live life and to use her senses to help another human being. And that's why I say animals are actually incredible, and we can learn so much from them, whether it be a dog, cat, a farm animal. My friend and I just found a little baby squirrel, and we ended up rescuing it, and it was just so precious and needed to be bottle fed. We didn't know where to take, so we looked at wildlife sanctuary. They took the squirrel in, and I realized this is just a baby. So really, I mean, they have different lives. They may not be as intimately connected to us as the dogs and cats, but all animals are sentient beings. I'm sure that most of us would agree with that based on the scientific research now that's coming out and the evidence of that. So as we learn more, hopefully we can connect more to them as individuals.
I really
Personalities
hope
too.
so. I
Yeah, I
really
think
hope
so.
so.
Yeah, I think so. I think that will happen incrementally, right, with time. But first, we need to stop the killing in the shelter so that that becomes something archaic, part of our history, as opposed to being done in the present day.
Yes.
So that's something that's quite urgent, and I would please encourage other people to become involved to help change that with their local shelters, and then it can become hopefully a federal law that it is simply outlawed.
I really hope so. I feel the same way. I feel that we're trending in that direction because there are
Yes,
so many people who are so much more vocal and
yes,
passionate about animals now
yes,
than there used to be. I
yes,
feel like there's been a cultural shift in how we look at pets and how we treat farm life and just
yes.
other animals in general. I really do think that we're headed in the right direction.
Absolutely, we are. I mean, I can say happily when I started the practice over a decade ago and practiced for almost a decade, how much has changed since then, the landscape and the animal cruelty laws that are passing almost weekly. I like to post on my LinkedIn happy news stories all over the world, in particular in the States with the animal cruelty. That too is something that is hugely important, and it's connected to that whole idea of protecting companion animals from abuse, right? And then all over the world, I read today before the podcast, actually, that India, a country that has so many stray animals, millions of stray animals, the Supreme Court passed a law that stray animals have a constitutional right to food and protection. So they're not going to be killing a million stray dogs. That's an important message globally, that people are standing up for compassion and realizing that these animals are innocent and that we are the decision makers and we have the ability to speak up for them, both individually and collectively, through our communities, through these consensus models, working with our shelter systems, to making individual choices, adopting, fostering. If you can't do either of those, share. Social media can be a powerful motivator, and these animals just need people to speak up for them. And I'm seeing so much of that, which is amazing from when I started.
That gives me a lot of hope.
Good. I like to leave it on a hopeful message. There is that. Yeah, we need to leave it hopeful for people. We don't want people to feel overwhelmed or sad. I don't want to do that. I'm hoping to inspire and motivate and leave people with something like a takeaway message, which is small changes can lead to big changes. One individual act of kindness can change the world for one animal, which then spirals out.
Yeah, absolutely. That ripple effect is powerful in so many different aspects of our lives.
It is. And it's really up to us to do something.
It really is. And you are doing that. You started off in a courtroom and now you've moved to writing and media and advocacy. What made that shift come about for you and why is it important?
When I left practice, I wanted to continue my advocacy work, which I felt could have more of an impact. The courts were very important and the practice was also very, very fulfilling for a time. From a more holistic perspective, the advocacy point is where I'm more passionate to be able to make changes both incrementally and more holistically. For example, now I'm doing a YouTube series called A Voice for Animals, where I'm visiting animal rescues and sanctuaries, and I've just wrapped up the summer series of that and sharing the stories of the animals. So the individual animals, and I'm just writing a new book, What Animals Can Teach Us, and hopefully those acts will lead to some people learning more about animals themselves and what they can do individually.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And for anybody who's listening right now that wants to help, but they're probably feeling a little overwhelmed right now and they don't know where to start, what's one action step that you would recommend they can take today that would lead them in the right direction?
One action step I would say is to do your research if you're interested in helping an animal or a shelter or an organization. It's so easy to go online and to do some research in terms of what resonates with you, what fuels you, what feels passionate, because that's something that will likely draw you to the right path, whether, again, back to adopting, fostering, volunteering, donating, or simply sharing on social media, or dedicating your vocation to legislation being passed by becoming a politician. All of us individually can make a difference. So I would say to just start small. Start small and just do some research.
If you don't know what you're getting yourself into, then it's going to be even more confusing and stressful. So definitely take a look at what's going on around you and figure out where you feel comfortable starting.
Where you feel comfortable. That's right, because that's going to motivate you, I would say, more than anything else, more than anything I can say, because my journey is personal and unique, and everyone else's will be too. No less, no more. Just because someone becomes an expert in the field doesn't mean that they're doing more than someone who goes into a shelter and saves an animal's life from euthanasia today. Yeah. From a kill shelter. That's just as impactful and important. And then shares when people, like I walk my rescue dog, Oakley, who we met before the podcast, and I love to say he's a rescue, and I know your dogs are, which is, again, educating, sharing. You can have lovely dogs. They don't have to come from breeders or pet stores.
Absolutely. And With all that being said, everything that you've put together with your career, what do you hope that your legacy in animal law and advocacy will be?
My own personal legacy, I hope, is that compassion and policy can be combined. So with my background as an animal rights lawyer, that understanding animals individually as unique sentient beings is just as important as it is to change laws, and combining the two would be the ultimate hope for my work to bridge that gap in terms of not being seen as property, and to have supportive family members. My husband, my kids have gone into rescues and sanctuaries with me, and hopefully other people's family members can too.
It's so inspirational when somebody takes their passion, takes their love for animals or whatever their passion is, but because we're talking about animals, take their love for
Yeah.
animals and then just causes this huge ripple effect throughout the community. And like you said, one voice, right? You're just one voice, but you've impacted everyone who's read your book. You've impacted your own family member. You even got your mom to adopt a dog that you
Yeah.
fell in love with. So look at all of the change that just one voice can make. I think that's a really huge message for
Well,
everyone
thank
who's
you.
listening to hear.
And you as well. I mean, what you're doing is wonderful, and I'm inspired by your work and what you're doing, because again, you're elevating, you're bringing this to the viewer's attention, and that's hugely important. I hope also to empower the youth, to empower others to want to become advocates. I hope that that's another reason I wrote this book, to hopefully inspire someone else to want to continue to become an advocate and to do something in the movement, because there's so much to be done and so many ways to contribute.
If we don't talk about the things that we as a society have been told we shouldn't talk about, those are the areas that we're struggling in, and that is why I do what I do. That's why you do what you do, because if
Yeah.
we don't educate, if we don't spread the word, if we don't teach people that there's so much behind it and there's such a bigger picture that has to be tackled, we can't make change. We have to do the things that nobody else is willing to do in order for there to be progressive change. It's not
And
always easy. It
it's
sucks
not easy.
sometimes.
Of course, it is. Of course, especially when you're going against the grain. Of course it is. But let me tell you, it is so fulfilling. Nothing fills my heart and soul more than when I feel that I've done something for an animal in need. And I'm sure that most people that care about animals would feel the same way, no less. It's extremely fulfilling, and it can be one small act. Again, I say kindness, that can have ripple effects into the other areas.
It's crazy how much one small thing can make such a big change. So, what's next for you? Do you have new projects, new writing, or are you just going to try to continue to grow this movement for a voice for animals?
I am writing the new book, What Animals Teach Us, from my experience of this YouTube series that I just wrapped up this summer, visiting sanctuaries, mainly farm animals, and highlighting their stories and continuing with that. And I have an organization called Center for Animal Advocacy that I've had for a while that I'm going to continue and get more people involved in. So that's super exciting. So people can learn more about the animal laws in simple ways and what they can do without feeling overwhelmed. So I'll have that up on my website, susannagartner.com. I'll have a link there if anyone's interested in finding out, how do I get involved in my own community? What do I do? Just a simple thing. Then I'll have that information up. Hopefully I'll start that this fall, and just continue my advocacy work and spreading some motivation and inspiration.
Well, I look forward to following your journey and maybe connecting with you after you release your second book.
Yeah, I'd love that.
I just think it gives us such an opportunity, especially what our animals teach us. I mean, that's something that everybody who loves animals can tune into and learn something from. I think what you're doing is really important work. And I appreciate you being here today, sharing your heart, your expertise, and your passion for giving animals a voice. It's such a powerful message that I think everyone needs to hear. So I have one final question for you,
Sure.
and that is, what would you like to leave the listeners with?
I'd love to leave the listeners with hope. Hope that we are making positive changes for animals, that every day I hear a positive news story, share an animal law change for the positive, that I will likely write a post about and deployed to LinkedIn, and that inspires me. And I'd like to say that there is definitely so much that can be done and is being done to make better lives for animals in need, and that our voices do matter. One voice makes a difference. And that's the difference between this book that I wrote, which is more advocacy based, as you said, like learning about what can be done, on a legislative level, individual. Whereas what Animals Teach Us is really an inspirational read for a mainstream person that just wants to understand how animals show us love and how they make us better humans.
Excellent. Tell everyone how they can get in touch with you, where they can find your book, and all of the things.
Okay, sure. So I have the website, SusannaGartner.com. So feel free to message me in the contact me spot, or you can subscribe to the newsletter blogs if you want to learn about topics that resonate for animals. Otherwise, I have LinkedIn, Susanna Gartner, Instagram. I am definitely reachable and accessible. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out.
Amazing. Well, you guys, thank you so much for being here this week. Remember to be kind, spread joy, and lead with hope in your dogs' lives. And we will see you next week on Straight Up Dog Talk.